an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering the stone sky, Sil Anagist 1 and chapters 11 and 12. You're almost home, and Nassun, not alone. In these chapters, I mean, it's weird that it says Nassun not alone because, like, really, she totally is. 100%, in a lot of ways, more alone than she has literally ever been. And also, we find out in Sil Anagist exactly what has been powering the magic of this place, and it is really hideous. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. First of all, thank you very much to Denise for commissioning this episode. Again, this is an extra long one, so that's good. I am not sure whether or not to say I was right about this whole thing because, like, honestly, I was kind of, but also I was so far off base in terms of how this was, like, I guessed that the power source they were using, not even the power source, I guessed that there was something that they were doing with turning the stone eaters into, like, node maintainers of a kind. And in some ways, this seems kinder because they're able to tell that these stone eaters do not feel pain, which cannot be said of the node maintainers. The node maintainers have to be fed drugs. They have to be, and they are still a human body that can be abused, which is apparently part of the appeal for people who pay extra to be able to come in and do that. So they have been spared that, but the difference is that node maintainers are, first of all, often children. But they have been discovered to be, like, incalcitrant. And they are it feels like with the stone eaters, that seems to be actually the same, that they are put in this position if they can no longer function effectively at their regular job, right? So I don't know. It feels like really, really close to the same thing. It's just done in a slightly kinder way. And I'm not entirely certain if that is due to the magic involved, if because we have seemed to, like, lose connection with the magic as time moves on, that maybe they don't even know how to save them from pain, or if this civilization has simply evolved past giving a shit. Maybe they just don't care. They do feed them drugs to keep them from feeling pain as much as possible. I guess that if the node maintainers felt pain, that would result in them not being able to do their job effectively. So probably they do care, but not because they actually, like, have any sympathy. It's just because it's inefficient. But okay, I'm getting ahead of myself here. It's such a big reveal. So first of all, we start off Sil Anagist 1 with them taking Kalenli away in the morning. And it's a really interesting scene because when it first, the first sentence is they take Kalenli away in the morning. And I thought this was going to be a kind of a violent scene of our girl getting, like, gripped up and dragged off, kicking and screaming. But it's very, very different because Conductor Galat is the one who shows up for her. And I had forgotten they're raised together and they have a relationship. And there's this moment, she stands straight and tall like one of them as she speaks to Galat. I assess her tension like a fault line poised to slip. How much longer do you mean to keep up this foolishness? Sleeping in the shed? Kalenli says calmly, is there a problem? Galat is the highest ranked of the conductors. He is also the cruelest. We don't think he means it. It's just that he does not seem to understand that cruelty is possible with us. We are the machine's tuners. We ourselves must be attuned for the good of the project. That this process sometimes causes pain or fear or decommissioning to the briar patch is incidental. We have wondered if Galat has feelings himself. He does, I see. When he draws back now, expression all a ripple with hurt, as if Kalenli's words have struck him some sort of blow. I've been good to you, he says. His voice wavers. And I'm grateful. Kalenli hasn't shifted the inflection of her voice at all, or a muscle of her face. She looks and sounds for the first time like one of us. And as we so often do, she and he are having a conversation that has nothing to do with the words coming from their mouths. So, yeah. Finally, he says, I need you back at the lab. She gets a little irritated and is like, I was told that I had more time. And he says something about how they are picking up scans of something going on that's a little bit different than usual. I'll take them to wherever you were planning to go today, and then you can go back to the compound. And she's finally like, okay, they need to see the local engine fragment. And Galat is like, why? They live right underneath it practically. What difference does it make? And she says they haven't seen the socket. They need to fully understand its growth process more than theoretically. And what's insane here, and it continues to be carried over that way once we actually get to the site, Galat seems to have no real understanding of how this is going to affect them, because he truly does not see these people as being capable of compassion or fear or emotion of any kind. So when she says they need to see the socket, he's still kind of like, what? Why? And you would really think he would know exactly why. That he would see through what she's trying to do and be like, oh, they're going to see what the source of the magic is, and they're going to be fucked up over it, and that he would maybe decline to show them this. Or that he would react in such a way as when she suggests that that's what she was going to do, he gets angry because he didn't realize she intended to show them that at all. And then he would be like, what? Oh my God, you were taking them there? Fucking no. But instead, it is so not registering for him that this would ever be upsetting that he agrees without even an understanding of the significance of doing this at all. There's not any argument from him because he doesn't see the point, which is astonishing. Like, I don't know, guys. That's crazy to me. I mean, it makes sense, but also, dude, where's your brain at? It says, I understand precisely why Kalenli has spoken in this dismissive tone and why she hasn't bothered to say farewell before leaving. It's no more than any of us do when we must watch or assess another of our network punished. We pretend not to care. And then, in parentheses, Tetlewa, your song is toneless, but not silent. From where do you sing? Correct me if I'm wrong, but is this the first time that we have realized that people who are taken away are still perceived as alive somewhere? Because I didn't really realize that, I don't think, unless it was mentioned before and I just have forgotten it in the sort of chaos of everything else that's happening. But this was my first clue that I was on the right track with my assessment from the last episode, which was I think that they, like, it's not, it can't be like, because my guesses were it's like a work camp or something of that nature, or they are treated like node maintainers, which is worst case scenario. And once I read that, it pretty much confirmed my node maintainer theory. And again, it turns out to be very different in the way that it is implemented, but it's essentially the same, like, it's the same treating of a human being as a piece of machinery, essentially. That shortens the punishment for all and prevents the conductors from focusing on another in their anger. Understanding this and feeling nothing as she walks away are two very different things, however. So they head out with Galat. He doesn't want to let them eat or have anything to drink before they leave. And he walks really fast. And all of them have been kept so secluded and without any exercise to speak of that they are extremely sore and exhausted from all of the walking that they did the day before. So at first, they can't even keep up with him. And he finally turns around and realizes that he has left them 15 feet behind him, and he lets them catch up. And eventually they are all piled into a vehicle. And this is a really interesting section for me where Hoa notices that Galat is being treated very differently by his peers than any of the other conductors. First, they start asking him about Kalenli and, as they put it, whether she is always this intransigent, which it's an interesting thing because, they must know, I think it's public knowledge at this point, that they were raised together. So they are not at all seeing him as actually related to her, or they don't think that he has any sort of emotional attachment to her, because I assume they think he shouldn't, right? And he does, but I think he kind of resents that he does. And also, it turns out that he is, in appearance, a little bit more of the Nyes, is that how you say their name, than he should be. I notice how the other conductor's disdain actually increases his tension, making anger radiate off his skin like the residual heat of sunlight from a rock. There have always been odd dynamics to the conductors' relationships. We've puzzled them out as best we could while not really understanding. Now, however, thanks to Kalenli's explanation, I remember that Galat has undesirable ancestry. We were made this way. But he was simply born with pale skin and ice-white eyes, traits common among the Nyes. He isn't Nyes. The Nyes are gone. There are other races, Solanogistine races, with pale skin. The eyes suggest, however, that somewhere in his family's history, distant or he would not have been permitted schooling and medical care and his prestigious current position, someone made children with the Nyes person. Or not. The trait could be a random mutation or happenstance of pigment expression. Apparently, no one thinks it is, though. This is why, though Galat works harder and spends more hours at the compound than anyone and is in charge, the other conductors treat him as if he is less than what he is. If he did not pass on the favor in his dealings with us, I would pity him. As it is, I am afraid of him. I always have been afraid of him. But for Kalenli, I decide to be brave. So, there's a lot to unpack here. Galat is raised with Kalenli. It's a weird dynamic because Kalenli is outright a origin, a version of a stone person. And he received favorable treatment in comparison to her, I assume, because of the way that she talks about her childhood, all his life. However, once he is in the real world, that shifts because other people are aware of what he is. And he had always been able to be in comparison to his sister, the better of the two. But I wonder if that was a bit of a shock for him, right? Like, he was used to being treated a certain way, and then to go out in the world and find out that other people do not see you that way. Not like he thought. And then there is the fact that he is put in charge of people who are a more extreme version of what his sister is, but also what he himself is. So I really wonder how long it took for him to realize that they're all of the same category, or if he ever has. I suspect he has. It's easy to be like, I don't think he would ever admit that to himself. I don't think he would have this rage if he weren't aware that he is considered one of them by everybody who matters. And this is one of those things that's like, so I'm going to get out in front of this statement by prefacing, I have never really liked this explanation of things, and I'll explain why. But it reminds me of the accusations that people who are particularly homophobic and vitriolic in their condemnation of homosexuality are they themselves harboring homosexual feelings and curiosities and struggles. Now, the reason that I don't like that line of thinking, even though it can be true, is because I feel like it is often the go-to explanation for heterosexual people to explain why somebody is being homophobic to the degree that they are. And I think that is heterosexual people's way of distancing themselves from homophobia and making it as if the homophobia is coming from inside the house and it's really other gays oppressing gays and not us, because heterosexuals aren't worried about it because we're just, we're not struggling with the thought of whether we are gay or not like those people are. And to me, that's a really nice, easy way of divorcing your own community from responsibility for the way that they treat people by just acting like, oh, they probably only act that way because they're secretly gay. Which, again, can that be true sometimes? Sure. But I feel like it's just sort of a like get out of jail free card. But there is something to this which is different in that homophobia manifests by somebody who has struggled with his own or her own or their own struggles and doubts about their own sexual preferences and their sexuality in general. That is a super private thing that people won't necessarily be able to tell about you unless you make it obvious in some way. Or unless they have their own, bigoted ideas of what that looks like and they think they see those traits in you. This is straight up appearance, which cannot be changed or hidden. And due to that, Galat has a much more obvious connection to these people that is undeniable, and a much more obvious reason to despise them because of his connection. And y'all, there is nothing out there quite so damaging and lethal as self-loathing. It's just nothing comes close, because self-loathing does not necessarily always manifest as self-loathing at all. It certainly can be any number of things that it looks like from the outside. And that's what I find so terrifying about it, to be honest. Self-loathing is the kind of poison that is inside of a person and can seep out in so many different ways. And it can poison that person themselves, or they can do what Galat is trying to do and dilute that poison by inflicting it on other people and attempting to shield themselves from it by making sure that it is spread around. And I mean, it's amazing because I last section in Sil Anagus 2, Hoa says something about how when Kalenli informs them all that she's basically like kind of related to Galat, that explains a lot. And Hoa seems to be completely on that track, that he gets it. He's like, oh my God, that's why he's so much worse to us than everybody else. There it is, you know? So at this point, Hoa straight up asks Galat, why are you angry with her? And this is a really interesting moment because Hoa knows that he is not supposed to make eye contact. Hoa knows that he is not supposed to like address him directly and with sincere curiosity in this way, but he decides to risk it. So he notices that also Galat is right, that they are changing all of a sudden, complexifying, our ambient influence strengthening as a result of the things Kalenli has shown us. And I love this breakdown of how everybody is feeling about this moment. For now, we are confused, where before we were mostly unified. Remwa and Gewa are angry at me for taking this risk without seeking consensus first. Biniwa and Salewa are irrationally angry at Kalenli for the strange way she is affecting me. Dushwa is done with all of us and just wants to go home. Beneath her anger, Gewa is afraid for me, but she also pities me because I think she understands that my recklessness is a symptom of something else. I have decided that I am in love, but love is a painful hot spot roil beneath the surface of me in a place where once there was stability, and I do not like it. Once, after all, I believed I was the finest tool ever created by a great civilization. Now I have learned that I am a mistake cobbled together by paranoid thieves who were terrified of their own mediocrity. Woo! Oh, is that the most savage read on the plate? Like, I swear to God. I am a mistake cobbled together by paranoid thieves who were terrified of their own mediocrity. Oh, God. I read that and I just stopped for a second, was just like, woof. None of them are angry at Galat for being too dangerous to have a simple conversation with, though. There's something very wrong with that. Word. Yeah. There is. So finally Galat's like, well, what makes you think that? And then he stops and he's like, never mind. I know how you process information, and I suppose you're right. You want her to live in your house. It's her house, he snaps. She grew up there, same as me. She was part of the project. He nods once tightly, his mouth twisted in bitterness. So was I. A human was a necessary control, and I had useful characteristics for comparison. I thought of her as my sister until we both reached the age of 15. Then they told us, which is a little bit longer than I expected. It makes sense, though. You know, people treat 15, 16 as like sort of a coming of age moment. So it does make sense. But I kind of had it in my head that it had been a little bit sooner than that. And at this point, Hoa was thinking about how Kalenli must have known perfectly well by then that something was different about her. She could just tell. I mean, the abilities that you have and the way you interact with the world being so different than other people, and you just know. But Galat wouldn't have known, and it would have been much more of a shock to him to hear this. Perhaps his view of the world had been as thoroughly upended as mine has been now. Perhaps he floundered or flounders in the same way, struggling to resolve his feelings with reality. I never mistreated her. Never treated her like... He blinks and darts a hooded glance at me. I start to nod, to show him that I understand, but some instinct warns me against doing this, and I just look back at him. He relaxes. I don't know why. And immediately I'm like, yeah, because he thinks you don't get it, and he's relieved. But immediately Remwa says he doesn't want you to hear him say like one of you, and he doesn't want you to know what it means if he says it. He reassures himself he is not like the people who made his own life harder. It's a lie, but he needs it and he needs us to support that lie. She should not have told us that we were yes. We aren't yes. To them, we are. And we stop arguing because she's right. So, again, so much to unpack. He reassures himself that he is not like the people who made his own life harder. Man, if that isn't the other truth. Like, and this is the thing, because basically what's going on with Galat is that he is somebody who is almost white passing. He can be treated as like getting the same rights as white people, but there's just enough of a hint of some other blood in him that makes it clear to everybody who knows him. Yeah, but you're not, though. And that's the thing that I feel a lot of people fail to understand about oppression and prejudices and racism and the levels of racism that there are. Because you can be black and still have privilege due to the fact that you are much more light-skinned than your peers. And it's a really thorny subject that I see being fought over a lot in black spaces, where people who are light-skinned feel that other black people do not take their blackness seriously because they do not suffer the same level or directness of racism as darker-skinned black people. And in practicality, they do not, in many ways, suffer the same kind of racism. It's just true. On the other hand, they are black, and their blackness is a part of them just as much as it's part of a darker-skinned black person. And they want that acknowledged and to feel like they are part of the black community because they have still always felt not white. And so it is hard to reconcile having felt not white your whole life with the fact that people of the black community don't really see you as black either, or not the kind of black that they are. And obviously, because I am wholly white passing, almost wholly, I kind of get how that could be really frustrating, because I am someone who, when I am around all white people, it's pretty obvious I'm not white. And it's not obvious in a way that results in there being like a discrimination against me. I have never suffered that kind of oppression because I am so white presenting, because of the way that I speak, the education that I was lucky enough to get. There is a whiteness to my overall presentation to the world. And that buys me clearance to basically anything. The only times that I have really felt I am not like these white people have been when it is just me in a crowd of Caucasian people. And there has been a lot of, like, for example, growing up in a suburb that was all white. All of the stores sold clothing that did not fit me because my body was different. All of the hair products that were sold were the kind that did not work for me because I have very textured hair. There were little things like that that reminded me that I was not like these other classmates of mine. But I also wasn't Spanish. I didn't speak Spanish. I wasn't raised in a wholly Spanish household. And so I never really felt like I fit there either. And there's a real awkwardness in that, of trying to figure out exactly where you fall and what you can claim as yours and your culture and what is kind of not yours. And I have always had this weird thing, like, you know, I grew up going to parties on my father's side of the family where the celebrations were always marked with a lot of dancing and loud music. And it was a shock when I started to go to white parties, and that was not how they were at all. And I went to a wedding a couple years ago with Owen. And nobody was dancing at this wedding. And I said something like, man, white people do not like dancing, huh? And Owen got kind of like snarky and said, I don't know why you say white people, like you're not a white person yourself. And it really took me off guard, because in most ways, that's not untrue. But there are some parts of who I am that are distinctly not. I have grown up in many ways with different pieces of a culture as a large part of my life. Not wholly constantly. Not like, cousins of mine who both their parents were Colombian and they moved to America. I had a parent who was Colombian and my mother was white. But there was a dismissiveness in the way he said that really felt like he was completely erasing a whole section of who I am in this ignorance that just because I look and act a certain way, that I have no connection to this culture or this way of life that he has never encountered or understood. And I got really angry. I got really upset by it. And like afterwards I talked to him about it and I was like, that was fucked up. You don't know anything about my family because I moved to you and have met all of your people and you have never met mine. So you have no idea what you're talking about. And you just erased an entire piece of me the way that you said that. And that was really gross. And yet, again, if I am surrounded by Colombian people, I am very aware that I do not have the same connection to my heritage that they have. And it's a very strange place to be. You just feel like you don't really fit anywhere. And you want someone who like understands that, but there's never going to be another person who like wholly has the same experience as you. And it's just kind of lonely. So all that to say, I kind of feel for Galat in that, like, it feels that he has no footing here. He doesn't know where he belongs. He's trying to make a space for himself. And he has like succeeded in name at having done that. He has gotten his position. He has made his money. I assume that they're making money. He has authority. And yet nobody really buys it. Nobody takes it seriously. And it doesn't feel like he is comfortable here at all. His peers do not see him as a peer. And it's just a really stark, constant reminder for him of the fact that, like, and I'm sure that because of the fact that he doesn't fit with them, he feels that Kalenli should be more understanding of his position in all this. That he feels like he and Kalenli have similar experiences because of the way he's treated by everybody else. But the truth is, they don't have similar experiences either. And this is what I mean when I say it's really hard to find somebody who has gone through the exact same thing and is coming at things from the same place as you. That's a hard thing to find. And with Kalenli, it feels like Galat maybe like identifies with her a little bit more because of feeling constantly excluded and treated as less than. But Kalenli knows Galat has no fucking idea what she goes through. He is nowhere close to what she experiences. So I could understand her being kind of resentful of him trying to co-opt her experience and be like, no, but I get it. And she's like, no, you really don't. Shut up. Like, it's not at all the same. And Galat, it's just that kind of blindness that you get when you have privilege and you don't, because you don't have as much privilege as someone else, you pretend that you don't have any. And that's not how, it's never black and white like that, pun intended. So Galat is just, I have this weird like contempt, but also sympathy. He is a very interesting character in a really weird position. He says, I've given her as much freedom as I can. Everyone knows what she is, but I've allowed her the same privileges that any normal woman would have. Of course, there are restrictions, limitations, but that's reasonable. I can't be seen to be lax if she acts as if she can't understand that, as if I'm the problem, not the world. I'm trying to help her. Later, when we process all this, I will tell the others she wants to be a person. She wants the impossible, Dushwa will say. Galet thinks it's better to own her himself rather than allow Sil-Anagus to do the same. But for her to be a person, she must stop being ownable by anyone. Then Sil-Anagus must stop being Sil-Anagus, Geisha will add sadly. Bingo. Correct. And this is the thing. I would rather own her than allow the rest of the world to own her. And I will inflict punishments or keep her within certain parameters. But I will be doing it for her own good out of love versus doing it for the wrong reasons, which are because I have a simple desire to control her and a fear of her. The truth is, when it comes down to it, whatever reasoning you have behind controlling a person, it is still boiling down to the same result. You are controlling them and not allowing them to be a full human being. Doesn't matter what your, motivation behind that is. And she acts like I'm the problem, not the world. It's just like, this is part of the respectability politics argument. And when I say respectability politics, the immediate, especially with this book, association there is with the Black community being told, pull your pants up, don't use slang and speak a certain way, give off this certain kind of appearance. Oftentimes it has to do with treating your hair to make it look straighter because that's seen as more professional. But this also applies to people who try and police women and ensure that they dress more modestly and that they act more demure in order to keep them from being raped because that is their own fault. And they will say, it's I know that I shouldn't tell you to behave this way or dress this way, but the world is what the world is. And you have to be realistic about that. And it always sounds practical when it's said this way until you look at it for even a moment. And then you realize that if you bow to the assumption that you bring upon yourself whatever treatment you get by simple things like how you speak and the way you dress, you are enforcing this problem and you are perpetuating it. And the whole deal behind breaking this down is encouraging people to be who they are and taking the world to task for constantly treating them the way that they do, which is much harder and a bigger job and scarier and will result in more casualties, but also is the more effective and long-term and noble, I think, effort. So, yeah. Anyway, I'm 40 minutes into this fucking thing and I haven't even gotten through Sil-Anagus one. Jesus Christ. Okay. So they get off the vehicle. They are heading into the area where the socket is. And they are getting closer and closer to this amethyst and really kind of overwhelmed by the size of it and how near it is and how huge it is. When they look up at the sky, it's almost completely blocking the sky out. It's, so tall that they can't really even see the top of it. And they are walking in there and Hoa is thinking to himself about how he's wondering if he could have had a choice for any kind of life, what he would have chosen for himself. And he starts thinking about Kalenli and wanting to be with her. And then immediately sort of has this shame overcome him because he hasn't got the right to even fantasize about that stuff, which, yeah. Well, here it is. I have no idea why Kalenli wanted you to see it, but now you see it. Can we go closer? Gewa asks. And again, they don't know what it is that Kalenli really wanted them to see. They're just asking because they genuinely would like to get closer. Galat doesn't seem to understand what Kalenli wanted them to see either. So they get closer. My attention is suddenly caught by an odd sensation, the strangest thing I have ever sensed. What is that? Oh, I suppose you're close enough to detect it here. That's just sink line feedback. And what is a sink line? Asks Remois. Evil death, Galat sighs at last. Fine, easier to show than to explain. Come on. He speeds up again, and this time none of us dares complain even though we are pushing our aching legs on low blood sugar and some dehydration. And they walk in, and it says, and there we are destroyed. Beyond the pylons, Conductor Gallet explains to us in a tone of unconcealed impatience, is the startup and translation system for the fragment. He slips into a detailed technical explanation that we absorb but do not really hear. Our network, the nigh constant system of connections through which we six communicate and assess each other's health and rumble warnings, has gone utterly silent and still. This is shock. This is horror. The gist of Galat's explanation is this. The fragments could not have begun the generation of magic on their own decades ago when they were first grown. Non-living, inorganic things like crystal are inert to magic. Therefore, in order to help the fragments initiate the generative cycle, raw magic must be used as a catalyst. Every engine needs a starter. Enter the sink lines. They look like vines, thick and gnarled, twisting and curling to form a lifelike thicket around the fragment's base. And ensnared in these vines, they are still alive. I know at once. Though they sprawl motionless amid the thicket of vines, lying atop the vines, twisted among them, wrapped up in them, speared by them where the vines grow through flesh, it is impossible not to sense the delicate threads of silver darting between the cells of this one's hand or dancing along the hairs of that one's back. Some of them we can see breathing, though the motion is so very slow. Many wear tattered rags for clothes, dry-rotted with years. A few are naked. Their hair and nails have not grown, and their bodies have not produced waste that we can see. Nor can they feel pain, I sense instinctively. This, at least, is a kindness. That is because the sink lines take all the magic of life from them save the bare trickle needed to keep them alive. Keeping them alive keeps them generating more. It is the briar patch. Back when we were newly decanted, still learning how to use the language that had been written into our brains during the growth phase, one of the conductors told us a story about where we would be sent if we became unable to work for some reason. That was when there were 14 of us. We would be retired, she said, to a place where we could still serve the project indirectly. It's peaceful there, the conductor said. I remember it clearly. She smiled as she said it. You'll see. The briar patch's victims have been here for decades. There are hundreds of them in view, and thousands more out of sight if the syncline thicket extends all the way around the amethyst's base. Millions when multiplied by 256. We cannot see Tetlewa or the others, but we know that they too are here somewhere, still alive, and yet not. Galat finishes up as we stare in silence. So after system priming, once the generative cycle is established, there's only an occasional need to reprime. He sighs, bored with his own voice. We stare in silence. Sync-lines store magic against any possible need. On launch day, each sync reservoir should have approximately 37 lamatiers stored, which is 3 times... He stops, sighs, pinches the bridge of his nose. There's no point to this. She's playing you, fool. It is as if he does not see what we're seeing. As if these stored, componentized lives mean nothing to him. Enough. It's time we got all of you back to the compound. So we go. And we begin at last to plan. Y'all, this is basically a very literal, is that the word that I want? Maybe just simplified reality our country just hates to acknowledge what we're built on. We just hate it. We want everyone to forget it and pretend that our history and foundations are an accident. Like, oh, that was just some bad judgment we had real quick, and we got over it, and just forget it. It's as if we we regard slavery and genocide as like cheating in a relationship. Like, well, you know, our hearts were in the right place because we still love you. And yeah, we definitely like fucked several other people and got a couple of them pregnant and ruined your trust in us and just trashed our whole relationship. But the past is the past. Can't you just stop bringing up old shit? And this, like, this sort of symbol, a power source based on sucking the life out of a population. Literally, they are turned into batteries piled up on top of each other, and all of the power and life is sucked out of them to fuel other things. May seem like such an exaggeration, but like it's so not. It just took us longer to do it, but we did it. We did the exact same thing. We built everything that we are from the bodies of vulnerable people. We stole their lives. We stole their children. We stole their land. We stole their heritage and made it illegal to acknowledge. This was a systemic breakdown of memory, not just a people, but the actual memory of the people. Did you know that when the Spanish conquered Central America and Peru, they made it illegal to eat quinoa? They penalized people for cooking with corn instead of wheat. It was that petty, really, is the word. They wanted these people to be so disconnected from their own culture that they were willing to outlaw foods to do it. So when you look at something like this in a story, it's just, there is a feeling of distance from it for those of us who don't want to see that this is literally what we did. All that she has done here is made it much more immediately material and, you know, visible. Our White House was built by slaves. And Michelle Obama mentioned that, and people lost their fucking minds. But it's the truth. But people just don't want you to ever mention it. And, you know, they have tours at plantation homes. And there are videos of white people arguing with the tour guides about how the slaves didn't even really have it that bad. They're arguing with historians about whether slaves were really suffering, really. We will go to lengths that are just unbelievable to behave as if what is true isn't true. It's just shocking. And when they say, then Sil Anna just has to stop being Sil Anna just, yeah, that is entirely correct. The only way for us to break out of this is some huge paradigm shift in this country. And I don't even know what that looks like because it would have to be so massive. I can't even imagine it. But there is up to this very day, an enormous piece of the population that just buries their head in the sand and does not want it acknowledged that this is a part of our history up until quite recently. We have spent, as a country, far more time committing genocide, stealing land, breaking treaties, and enslaving people than we have not. And we still are out here breaking treaties with Native Americans. We just did it in order to build a fucking oil pipeline a couple of years ago. So I don't know why all of a sudden people think that we get a pass, like we're not still doing this shit, but we are. It's just that it gets just as little press now as it ever did when it happens. Nobody cares. Because they are people who you can forget about and not care about, and it's just fine. Who cares? It is just, I mean, and this is, oh, and Tony is saying about, exactly what I was going to say. Tony says, it also reflects our present. Black people are allowed to live the bare minimum, but we siphon off their labor and resources. NK mentions how Ferguson balanced their budget off policing black people. Exactly. This is one of those, and this is something that I talked about when I used to do the broadcast, which I've since stopped doing because it was such an enormous investment of emotional labor and nobody was listening. But money bail, the fact that this country has a money bail system still ensures that people who are wealthy can get away with crimes and be free and still go out into and they are likely able to afford a better lawyer. If you can't, and people from oppressed classes often can't, then you are not released and oftentimes can be held for years with no trial. And then they can exploit your labor and keep you, for labor without paying you. And they can also count you as part of the population of the state, even if you do not get a vote towards the Electoral College. So they are able to literally use black and brown bodies as a prop for white people to get more representation in government. It's not like white people are not part of the prison population. I'm not saying that. I am saying brown people are more policed. And so much greater proportions of them in comparison to white people are incarcerated. And that is not because they commit more crimes. It is because they are more tightly policed. And there have been numerous studies that just verify this flat out. It is just, the numbers are out there. I'm not getting into it. Basically, this is 100% happening. This is our history, and it is how we function now. And we have simply changed the way it looks to make it seem like it's somehow justified now. We used to justify it by saying that black people weren't quite human, that they didn't feel pain the same way, which is still something that people believe because they are given less pain medication in hospitals and their pain is taken less seriously when they go to see the doctor. However, we have updated our bigotry so that now it's, well, they're criminals. And so, they're in prison because they deserve to be there because they commit more crimes. And it's just so far from the truth that it's just astonishing that this is still something we fucking say, but there it is. So yeah, this makes complete sense. And I urge anybody who saw this as just a general sort of horror story moment in a sci-fi novel to examine that and realize that this is literally true. We imprison and steal the lives of black and brown people to support our own systems of power. That's it. Dead end of sentence. That's all. So, we get to fucking Renanis. And this is chapter 11, You're Almost Home. There's a little bit of a fight with Renanis, but they are able to overcome them pretty easily. There's not many of them left, as it turns out, because fucking Essun turned them all into stone. And they like fire on Essun's group as they come up, but McSeeks manages to use a Taurus to sort of protect everybody. And he says something to her later about the fact that she didn't bother to help because she still hasn't like told anybody that she can't really use her magic without turning herself into what she really is, which is the stone person. I feel like that is the defect in the creation of origins. So this is my theory. They said that the Stone Eater versions are, well, Hoa is a Stone Eater. They're all, like, all of the ones that he was with are what we see as Stone Eaters today, right? So they are the originals. Kalenli was a new model, right? That was meant to be... Or no, Kalenli was the first one, and they thought she was too human. That's how it went, right? So then they made them seem less human, more robotic, really, in order to distance themselves as people from Stone Eaters. So how, if they decided that Kalenli was a little bit too human, how are there more of them now? Kalenli can't be the only one. How would that work? But Kalenli, if she is like Essun, but the Stone Eaters came after, why would her magic make her turn to stone? Ugh, I don't know. I was going to say I had a theory, but no, it doesn't work. I take it back. I don't know. Okay. So we have this fucking awful decision that poor Ika has to make. Oh, Ika, you sweet thing. Honey, I'm so sorry. Ika is not familiar with the node maintainers. She does not know what this is going to look like. She has been told, which is a very different thing, by Essun what this looks like. And Essun, there's a moment where she considers Ika going in alone, and because she doesn't want to see this again. But then she's sort of like, no, I can't do that. Alabaster knew what he was getting into when he led me into that room, and he had the fucking decency to accompany me and be there while I just process this fucking horror. And I need to have the same respect for Ika and do my duty and be there. And they have to decide exactly what they're going to do, because it's, of course, tempting to simply put the node, what are they called? The node maintainers out of their misery. But they cannot do that, because there is this fucking wall of fire very close to Renanus, which is part of what makes Renanus so safe, because it's so close to this huge wall of fire that is welling up from the rifting, that people are going as far away from that fucking rifting as they can get. They are turning and running, which makes sense. Renanus is so close to the rifting, though, that all of the ash and fire gets carried over it by the momentum of the rising heat and the wind. So Renanus is astonishingly very low on ash fall. They get like some occasional like drops of like cinders, which, you know, is dangerous, but it's not like it is in other places. When they get there, there's even like a goat, first like live animal they've seen in a minute. It is just a really unusually good spot to be in terms of being able to survive. But because they are so close to the rifting, it's also super dangerous unless you have somebody who is managing the earth. So the node maintainers are fucking necessary. And they kind of have to figure out how they're going to handle this, because they have a node maintainer there now that they have sort of decided they are going to leave where they are But that node maintainer will eventually die. And then what? Do they have to have somebody take their place? Do they have to have a volunteer step in and agree to be this now? And, I mean, Jesus Christ, that is horrifying. So, they go in, it says the node has a fully stocked storeroom, which you guess is meant to be an auxiliary storage site for the comm itself. It's more than even hungry, calmless Kostrima can eat, and it includes things everyone's been increasingly desperate for, like dried red and yellow fruit and canned greens. So this is just the node at first, and then they actually get to the comm proper a little bit later, and there is even more food. They are all kind of astonished, I think, at how much is still there and still good. Essun says that there is enough food for them to throw a feast every day for 10 years, and they wouldn't run out. So there's, at this node, there's plumbing so people can take showers, and people are getting in under the showers and like just standing there and crying because it's the first time that they have managed to like get clean after what they fucking just went through. But Essun takes a shower, and it says you take a shower and feel nothing except clean. When you claim a corner of the station's mess hall, you sit there atop your bedroll, leaning against the scoria wall, letting your thoughts drift. It is a really interesting thing how distant she is becoming from her humanity, you know, and there's an argument here that maybe that's because she's not entirely human, really, because maybe part of her has been manufactured in some way. I don't know. You need to feel again, you think, as you watch a dozen small tableaus play out before you. You're not sure where Ika is, probably spending the night in one of the sheds, knowing her, but you hope she lets one of her lovers stay with her this time. Ika needs that now. Kostrima needs to take care of its head woman. So Lerna comes and sits with her and tells her that there's somebody that he had to basically put down because they were injured in the attack. And he says, you've seen that thing in the wire chair. To this end, you say, if I succeed in shutting down the rifting, you may not need to keep the node maintainers. You're not sure that's true, but you hope it is. And I like this little bit where it says, he clasps your hand lightly. It's been fascinating to realize that he never initiates contact between you. He waits for you to offer, and then he meets your gestures with as much or as little intensity as you've brought to the effort, respecting your boundaries, which are sharp-edged and hair-triggered. You never knew he was so observant all these years, but then you should have guessed. He figured out you were an origin just by watching you years ago. Inan would have liked him, you decide. So, yeah, I really like that. That's one of those things that a lot of people who have suffered trauma feel that they are just too high maintenance to be in relationships because they think that nobody is ever going to understand or respect the fact that they have boundaries that are much more, as she puts it, hair-triggered than a lot of people, and that are much more like distinct and immovable than a lot of people. And the truth is, you can find someone who understands that. It just takes a lot of effort. Often it takes reaching out to other people who have been similarly traumatized because they understand due to their own experience with it. But it's not impossible. It's just, it just takes patience, I think. And I really liked that as much as she's not like in love with Lerna, that she notices things about him that make him seem like a distinctly good person and a respectful person, you know? So he finally is like, so let's talk. I've noticed something, and I'm pretty sure you did too, but you haven't wanted to think about it, and I've let you not think about it, but now we need to face it. How long has it been since you last menstruated? And this was mentioned in the last section, but I assumed that she had stopped menstruating because she was starving to death, because that is a thing. That is one of the symptoms for a lot of people who have anorexia. They just stop menstruating because their body is just like, oh yeah, you can't get pregnant. You are way too ill / thin and undernourished for us to be worrying about your fertility right now. You just need to stay alive. So we're not doing that. And it turns out that has never really for her been a trigger for stopping her period. She has gone through a lot of periods of being undernourished, and she still got her period. So he says, am I correct in understanding that you need to finish your business at core point within a time frame? Soon, yes. Very soon. It's a thing you haven't discussed and probably should have for the sake of your relationship. It's a thing you never needed to discuss because there was nothing to be said. Lerna says, using all the obelisks once did that to your arm. Yes. You're the one who asked what I was going to do about the season. He sighs. I was angry, but not wrong. His hand twitches a little on your own. What if I asked you not to do it? You don't laugh. If you did, it would be bitter, and he doesn't deserve that. Instead, you sigh and shift to lie down, pushing him until he does the same thing. You wouldn't ask, you say against his scalp. But what if I did? It's weary and heedless. He doesn't mean it. You kiss the back of his neck. I'd say, okay, and then there would be 3 of us and we'd all stay together until we die of ash lung. Promise, he says. He doesn't wait for your answer before falling asleep. 4 days later, you reach Renanis. So, Renanis is, like I said, a really good place to be in a lot of ways, but also very strange because it's filled with these stone people, and not the stone eater people, but people made out of precious gems, essentially. And also, there's like this constant lightning that's happening nearby due to the rifting. And Tonki is talking about how there's a way to harness reliable lightning and use it for power. And she's kind of like excited about it. But Essun is noticing that even though all these people are turned to stone in the city, there are still not as many of them as there should be. And when she talks to Hoa, he says that his people can be opportunistic eaters. So they've been coming here knowing that there is a feast to be had. There is a feast for both humans and stone people. And they are eating what are essentially the corpses left behind. But Hoa has a sort of there's a contempt to it when he talks about it, and he makes it clear that like he doesn't need to eat the way that some of his other brothers and sisters do. And he says something about how when they tried to make some more of themselves, it kind of went a little wrong, and some of them didn't come out right. And that seems to be part of the series of factions within the Stone Eaters about what to do here. So let's see, I'm trying to find, there aren't many statues as there should be. Oh yeah, here it is. So there were a lot of people here. Most of them must be missing. We too put aside surplus resources for later. Lesser members of my kind need to strengthen themselves. I don't. They are poorly made, weak, little better than beasts. We were so lonely in those early years, and at first we had no idea what we were doing. The hungry ones are the result of our fumbling. So I'm wondering if that was like actual intercourse, if they were trying to mate and they just didn't know how to do that and it just resulted in something strange, or what's going on. And she says, you're making another one now for me, aren't you? And this is exactly what I was guessing was going on, that him eating her is him saving up the pieces to like sort of put together into another person later somehow. And that seems to be kind of what it is. And she says antimony used alabaster and she made it look like him. And he says, he chose his own shape. We all do. Then it's him? Alabaster? The lattice doesn't always form perfectly, Essun. Even when it does, there is always loss of data. Hoa, if that's Alabaster, if I can talk to him, no. Why the rust not? Because it must be his choice first. Harder voice here. A reprimand. You flinch. More importantly, because we are fragile at the beginning like all new creatures, it takes centuries for us, the who of us, to cool. Even the slightest of pressures, like you demanding that he fit himself to your needs rather than his own, can damage the final shape of his personality. You take a step back, which surprises you because you hadn't realized you were getting in his face. And then you sag. Alabaster is alive, but not. Is Stone Eater Alabaster even remotely the same as flesh and blood that you knew? Does that matter anymore? I've lost him again, then, you murmur. He will live for an eternity, Hoa says. For as long as the earth exists, something of who he was will too. You're the one still in danger of being lost. But if you choose not to finish what we have begun, I will understand. So, Hoa knows that she's knocked up. And he's kind of giving her the opportunity to be like, I don't want to do this. But she's like, doesn't even really have to think about it for very long before she's like, yeah, no, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And here comes something that I was pleased to see. It's time you stopped being a coward, too, and went to find Nassun, even if she hates you. Even if you left her to face a terrible world alone, even if you are the worst mother in the world, you did your best. And maybe it means you're choosing one of your children, the one who has the best chance of survival over the other. But that's no different from what mothers have had to do since the dawn of time. Sacrifice the present in hopes of a better future. Fine. So be it. This is a mother's job. You'll see to it. So, he says that he can carry other people with him when he goes to Core Point. And Essun's like kind of thinking, oh, that sounds good. But then immediately stops herself and is like, no, if doing that would be really selfish. I would love Ika to come because Streama really needs her. And all these people have suffered enough. I don't need them being part of this. And he says, I think that if you love someone, you don't get to choose how they love you back. Why you gotta be so right, though, Hoa? I don't care for it. What are you doing? Stop it. Let's go ask them then, you say. And then let's go get my little girl. So then we get another one of those like installments of history where it's a response to that last letter that we saw where somebody was just like, there is a rhythm to the way this is, the shakes are happening and everything, and that Ragas are the ones saving our lives and we would be dead without them. And this person is replying, being like, we cut your funding because I think you should know they don't want to hear that Ragas are saving our lives. Your whole premise is about how they are like our saviors. Nobody wants to hear that, buddy. And I had to side with them to cut your funding because otherwise I was going to get fucking iced out of this whole thing. So be smart. What the fuck is wrong with you? Of course you weren't going to get your funding if you put it to them like this. Jesus Christ. And if that isn't enough, the Guardians are starting to ask questions. I don't know why. No one knows what drives those monsters, but that's why I voted with a committee majority. I want you alive, not dead in an alley with a glass poignard through your heart. I'm sorry. So, the fucking Guardians, I don't even know where to start about them. But let's start with Nassun alone. Honestly, as much as this is a pretty long chapter, what's going on with Nassun is pretty quick to cover. Essentially, she's trying to watch over Schaffa and keep him alive in the hopes that he will eventually recover. But it becomes more and more clear that he is wasting away. And in Core Point, there's still a lot of the infrastructure is perfectly fine. There are these beds that you can lay in and they will like clean you up like a bath and warm you and everything. Like, she's sort of thinking to herself how ridiculous it is that they are so reliant on magic that they aren't even willing to bathe themselves in the normal way. That they will use magic to do all of this when they really don't need to It's not even necessarily like easier if they are having to power it and she doesn't know how that works, the power. But she touched those vines, at the other, so we know how that is still a potential outcome. You could still use origins to power things. That's still there. And eventually she has a conversation with Steel, who is not her friend. And she is very aware of that now. And she kind of Steel tries to be like, well, I warned you this was going to be bad for him, and tries to kind of make it almost like playful. And she just is disgusted and looks at him and says, if he dies, I will hate you more than the world, which is really quite a blow. And at this point, she starts to theorize about maybe being able to save Schaffa if she turns him into stone, the way that she has with other people, that it could probably work. That he would be like steel. He wouldn't turn into stone the way that her father did, for example. But Steel then really gets emotional in a way we have never seen before, and asks her if she knows what it's like to live forever. And he talks about the way that you lose context in the world. The people that you love all slowly die. It is a constant search for home, because every home you find eventually falls apart and all of the people that you loved disappear. It is just this over and over again search for love and stability and things to make you feel human and focus on and give yourself purpose. And it's not actually a life at all after a point. And he is just tries so hard to get her to understand. He says, I would estimate guardians typically last 3,000 or 4,000 years, and that Schaffa is older than most of them. He is not necessarily one of the originals, but he is an early model. What kills the rest is losing the things that ordinary people need to be happy. Imagine what that's like. Are you lonely, little Nassun? Yes, she admits before she can think not to. Imagine being lonely forever. Imagine living here in Core Point forever with no one to talk to but me when I bother to respond. What do you think that'll be like? Terrible, she says, quietly now. Yes. So here's my theory. I believe your Schaffa survived by loving his charges. You and others like you soothed his loneliness. He truly does love you. Never doubt that about him. But he also needs you. You keep him happy. You keep him human, where otherwise time would have long since transformed him into something else. I am 40,000 years old. You're going to die when you open the gate, or if not, then sometime after, and whatever you do, Schaffa will lose you. He'll lose the one thing that has kept him human throughout the Earth's efforts to devour his will. He'll find no one new to love, either. Not here. And he won't be able to return to the stillness unless he's willing to risk the deep earth route again. So whether he heals somehow, or you change him into one of my kind, he will have no choice but to go on alone, endlessly yearning for what he will never again have. You have no idea what that's like. And then suddenly, shockingly, he is right in front of Nassun. But I do, he shouts. Nassun stumbles back and cries out. Between one blink and the next, however, Steel returns to his former position, upright, arms at his sides, a smile on his lips. So think carefully, Steel says. His voice is conversational again, as if nothing has happened. Think with something more than the selfishness of a child, little Nassun, and ask yourself, even if I could help you save that controlling, sadistic sack of shit that currently passes for your adoptive father figure. Why would I? Not even my enemy deserves that fate. No one does. And then she eventually just says, I'm sorry. And Steele is like, yeah, me too. I cannot stop you once you've opened the gate. I've manipulated you, yes, but the choice is still ultimately yours. Consider that until the earth dies, I live. That was its punishment for us. We became a part of it, chained fate to fate. The earth forgets neither those who stabbed it in the back, nor those who put the knife in our hand. And she stops and is like, our hand? What's that about? And he says, you achieve nothing by keeping any of us alive except cruelty. Put us broken monsters out of our misery, Nassun. The earth, Schaffa, me, you, all of us. So that's what's going on with Nassun in this chapter. Also, I should mention, Nassun can see the moon from here, and it's the first time she's ever seen it, and there's a big fucking hole in the middle. Which, what is that about? But backing up, we will go to the entries that are obviously by Alabaster that we're seeing. And I'm wondering if she eventually gets to these, because she mentions finding a bunch of books. And he is writing about how, like, first it's like the initial arrival and Alabaster trying to figure out exactly what this place is, mourning Inan, worrying about Cyanite, who he calls Cyan. And he says that he hates Core Point. Like, another day, same year, no writing about Inan or Karoo, off limits from now on. Cyan, I can still feel her, not Cess, feel. There's an obelisk here. I can connect to it. The amethyst is following Cyan. I wonder if she knows. This place is ridiculous. Anemone was right, and he spells it that way, that it's a way to trigger the obelisk gate without control cab. I don't know what control cab means. But he, in parentheses, it says Onyx, too powerful, can't risk it, would trigger alignment too quickly, and then who's to make the second trash change? And I guess trajectory change? But the rusters that built it put everything into that stupid hole. A told me some of it. Great project, my ass. It's worse to see, though. This whole rusting city is a crime scene. Tooted around and found great big pipes running along the bottom of the ocean. Huge! Ready to pump something from the hole all the way to the continent. Magic, Anemone says. Did they really need so much? More than the gate. Asked Antimony to take me into the hole today, and she said no. What's in the hole, huh? What's in the hole? And it kind of goes on in this way with him sort of train of consciousness, writing exactly what he's thinking and investigating like the different languages, talking about how much he misses people, that he misses Cyanite especially, and he like wishes she were there, but then takes it back and is like, no, I don't. And then he meets up with Cyanite, and we get entries after he has seen her. Cyanite told me the date, 6 years. No wonder she's so angry. Told me to go jump in a hole since it's been so long. She doesn't want to see me again. Told her I was sorry. My fault. All of it. The moon. Turn the spare key today. Lines of sight, lines of force, 3x3x3, cubicle arrangement like a good little crystal lattice. The key unlocks the gate. Dangerous to bring so many obelisks to Eumenes, though. Guardians everywhere. Wouldn't have time before they got me. Better make a spare key out of Origines. And who can I use? What is going... A spare key out of Origines? What does that mean? Does he just mean make a key like somebody who has the ability to handle it? Is that him teaching her how to do this, you know? Like, I guess. And then went in the hole. Don't bury me. Please don't, Cyan. I love you. I'm sorry. Keep me safe. Watch my back and I'll watch yours. There's no one else who's as strong as you. I wish so much that you were here. Please don't. Tony says the last one was before he broke the rift. Oh, okay. I thought it was after. He saw her before that happened again? I didn't remember that. So I'm assuming the went in the hole is after, that this like kind of panic is after. Tony says that's a new detail, him seeing her again. Okay. Because I was like, I didn't remember that. So then it goes, I've decided it's wrong. Everything's wrong. Some things are so broken that they can't be fixed. You just have to finish them off, sweep away the rubble, and start over. Antimony agrees. Some of the other Stone Eaters do too. Some don't. I won't let them find your boy, Cyan. I won't let them take him and burn his brain and put him in the wire chair. I won't let them find your girl either, if she's one of us, or even if she's guardian potential. Does guardian potential mean potential enough to be picked up by a guardian, or does that mean if she's potential to be turned into a guardian? What is that about? I don't like this. What follows won't be good, but it'll be bad for everyone. They could have chosen a different kind of equality. We could have all been safe and comfortable together, surviving together, but they didn't want that. Now, nobody gets to be safe. Maybe that's what it'll take for them to finally realize things have to change. Then I'll shut it down and put the moon back. It shouldn't stone me, the first trajectory adjustment, unless I underestimate, which is crossed out, and then says shouldn't. All I'm rusting good for anyway. After that, it'll be up to you, Cyan. Make it better. I know I told you it wasn't possible, that there was no way to make the world better, but I was wrong. I'm breaking it because I was wrong. Start it over. You were right. Change it. Make it better for the children you have left. Antimony says I might get to see that world. Guess we'll see. Rust it. I'm procrastinating. She's waiting. Back to Yemeni's today. For you. So I guess that was right before he actually does the rift. And that's what he's saying, back to Yemeni's today. So that is the last of his entries. And that is the last of this section. I'm got it in just the amount of time I needed. So that works. Oh, guys, I can't believe how much I have to say about these. Thank you so much again to Denise for commissioning the long versions. This has been so helpful. Oh, thank God. I don't know what I would have done otherwise. I would have had to cut down from 50 pages. That's all there is to it. I would have had to be like, sorry, 2 chapters per episode. I'm cutting back to 30 pages, you know. But yeah, this works out really well. So I'm going to wrap. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. I really appreciate y'all. And hope you've been enjoying the coverage. And I'll see you again soon with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.